Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Story Behind the Stories on NACTV for the April 5th edition of the Neepawa Banner Press. I'm your host this week, Casper, Wehrhahn, a photographer, writer, and archivist for the Neepawa Banner Press. Feels like it's been quite a while since I've been in the hosting seat this week, but I'm not alone. I have Ken here with me to join me on the show.
Good to be here. Thank you for what you do, Casper. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Always great to have Ken here, provide some commentary alongside me. And for this week, of course, as always, a great place to start for the news is on the front page. And we have a couple things on the front page this week. Of course, we have some details on the provincial budget. A lot of stuff to go through in there. Of course, you'll need to pick it up for yourself and take a look through all the details there. But one little note I did find kind of interesting just on the topic of renewable energy was that they're planning to do something with geothermal heating for some houses with this budget, which was kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's geothermal's been around for a long time. It's probably 30 years or more, and but they want to switch to geothermal because your only operating cost is the cost of pumping the water through the system, but installing it is not cheap. Like you probably, I would guesstimate 3-4 times what it would cost to put a furnace into a house for a geothermal system, because you've got all the trenching and the pipes and the all the pumping the water and everything. But it is a good system up to a point. I know a number of people who put it in and found out that it wasn't enough. So they were supplementing in the colder days with electric heat anyway.
Right.
It takes a long time to pay it back. And you just can't squeeze enough heat out of that water that's coming out of the ground in the winter months when it's minus 30 and a wind blowing. Very few of them will keep up. Mm-hmm. And I know somebody who's had one when they changed homes and they were going to put geothermal into their new home. And when they found out the price of putting it in now compared to what they did 20 some years ago in their previous home, they decided no, they went electric forced air heat, which isn't as efficient in some respects, but the initial cost is far less. Mm-hmm. And with the geothermal heat, you have to have all the ductwork and everything and the fans to blow unless you've got an in-floor heat system, which is a whole nother ball game in terms of cost. But
yeah.
But it's a good idea. I mean, it makes sense, but it doesn't necessarily make economic sense.
Right. Yeah. No, that's definitely a valid criticism. I mean, I'm always fascinated by technology about renewable energy and all that sort of stuff. But then, details on the mechanics of it and financials of it, I haven't really seen too much of perspective on that side of things. But definitely sounds like it's, especially with our climate, perhaps something that you'd want a bit of a double system on, if that makes sense, like the geothermal and then another thing to support that if it needs an extra boost, so to speak.
I may be wrong, but I don't know if I've ever heard of anybody who was totally satisfied with their geothermal because of unless you have a really big system. I mean, the bigger the system, of course, the more BTUs you're putting out, but the higher the cost of running it and the higher cost of installing it too. So I don't know. It's a long-term investment. If you're planning to live in the house for a short time and flip it, probably not. The person who puts in geothermal should be somebody who's planning to be in that home for a long time, I think, before it makes any sense at all.
Right. No, that makes sense. So there's that and a whole lot more that's mentioned in the provincial budget. Some changes to the education property tax as well, by the sounds of it. And I believe on page 17 it mentions that the province in particular, in regards to the spending forecast here, they did come out, of course, with a deficit from previous years, and that deficit with the increased spending that is outlined in the story here, that deficit is going to increase. Out of curiosity, Ken, I don't know if there has been, has the province ever run a surplus to your knowledge, or has there always sort of been, at least in your time period, a deficit?
That's a very good question, but it's very rare. It's very rare. And that's why we keep ending up with the huge debt that we have, because the deficit gets added to the debt every year. I think maybe one of the years under the Pallister government, they may have balanced the budget. I believe they did. And so they didn't maybe increase the debt that year. But this is going to be a deficit budget, and they're talking about 3 or 4 of them before they get it reined in, and they say that they're going to balance the budget. I'm skeptical. Governments, there's always, when you set governments up to do so many things, as we have in this century, well, last century too, to a certain extent, from healthcare to heating subsidies to electric car subsidies to all the social services, and God knows the huge demands on our healthcare system and our education system. It's very, very difficult to reach a point where you can actually catch up and say, well, we paid for everything this year and stayed within our budget. It's very difficult. But in answer to your question, I think maybe once or twice in the last 20 years, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, I know the federal government has never had a balanced budget, I don't think, since 1969. Maybe once in there, but one of the first Trudeau budgets, Trudeau Sr., had a balanced budget, but he quickly changed that. It went into deficit spending for the rest of his career, and so did most of his successors as well.
Yeah, it's just sort of something that popped into my mind as we were getting into this stuff, because I've never really sort of heard of that happening. So just definitely one of those little things that you kind of get curious about.
Yeah. Well, I think they got close or did it once in the Pallister 7 years, but I don't think it was. It's very rare. Very rare.
Yeah, I get the impression that, at least this is just me guessing anyway, it's probably easier to keep in budget or to get that surplus, or at least to avoid a deficit anyway on a smaller level, like, Neepawa Town Council level, for example, compared to provincial, because I mean it's such a larger swath of things to cover compared to that smaller government level, right?
Yeah, and the municipal governments are required by either using reserves or borrowing. They have to balance the budget every year. They can't run a deficit. They have to account for everything, which is the throwback to the 1920s and 30s when the municipalities, some of them went bankrupt because they couldn't pay their bills.
Okay.
And so there's generally I know in some areas of Alberta for sure it's an absolute must. You have to balance their budget, especially in some of the areas where they have the more droughty land, because they suffered terribly in the 1930s there. But generally speaking, it's expected that municipal governments are supposed to not run a deficit.
Well, there we go. Now I know. Learn something new every day, and I really appreciate your perspectives on this and many other topics as well. But we'll circle back to the front page here. Of course, we talked about some increases of spending and some losses on terms of the provincial budget and whatnot, but we unfortunately had another loss in the sporting world here at home. The Neepawa Titans were defeated by the Wehrhahn team in the playoffs here. That was yesterday, right? Or not yesterday.
No, days, Tuesday.
Tuesday, yeah.
Yeah, it was. It was a heartbreaker because they, during the year, and I mean, full disclosure, I'm heavily involved with the team, but they played Wehrhahn 6 times. They won 3 times, lost 3 times. In the first 4 games, they won twice and lost twice. They won at home twice and lost in Wehrhahn. And then they came back here, went to Wehrhahn, and they lost. And then for the 6th game, they lost here by a goal. And but it was tremendous hockey, huge crowds, 700-800. I think there were 900 people at the last game. Tremendous crowds, tremendous success. That's why the headline says an epic effort worth being proud of. And I think everybody is proud of that. There was always, after games over, they say, what if this puck hadn't hit the goalpost?
Yep.
What if this puck hadn't got away from that guy? But they did a tremendous job. And first time in I think 7 years since they've been in the playoffs, and so a great deal of credit is due to the players and the coaches and managers.
Definitely, yeah. It's, I mean, I know me not being really a sportsing person, just sort of in general, I was pretty happy to hear that the Titans got into the playoffs, because I know it was looking kind of dicey for them in terms of numbers and whatnot there. Statistically, to get in this year. So it was great for them to be able to pull that off. And even though they didn't quite get things playing out the way they wanted them to on Tuesday, it certainly sounds like they gave a tremendous effort. And you always like to see that big crowd as well. I mean, when you get into playoffs, that's just a totally different scene, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. The intensity just goes up. It's well known that to some extent the referees kind of pull back and let the play gets a little rougher and a little tougher. And some things that might be called on a penalty early in the season sometimes get ignored a little bit, and both sides know that. And so it makes for very exciting hockey. It can be very dangerous hockey at times, but I don't think there's any injuries or nothing serious that I know of in the playoff series. So it was really good. It was good for the league. It was good for both teams. It was especially good for Neepawa because it was such a step up from where we've been in the last few years. Right,
for sure. And I mean, Owen's got some great shots from the evening there. Of course, the front page photo as well, but some interior shots there to go alongside the story for this story. On page 19 there, another great shot. I mean, that one in the bottom right there on the page, and again, pick up the paper so you can see all of this, where the Titans players just like trying to eke in that shot there past the goalie, and the goalie's like slid down on the ice, and that's fantastic.
Flat out and stretched out to make the save.
Yep.
Good goaltenders on both teams. Really excellent goaltenders.
Yeah, it really sounded like it was some tough competitive play there for all aspects of the team, which is, I mean, that's what you want, right? Yep, it keeps you on the edge of your seat.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, edge of the seat is right. The edge of the seat just about wore off.
All right, moving along in the paper here, moving away from losses, but again, still great gameplay. We have a pair of wins here too, or I guess more than a pair if you take into consideration the number of people here. On page 18, we have some track athletes from Neepawa that are members of the Lethbridge College Kodiak's men's indoor track team. They were competing at the Alberta Colleges Athletic Conference, and those were Cole, and I apologize if I mispronounced the last name there. I think it's Gilbert.
Gilbert, yeah.
Gilbert. Yeah. And Ethan Lizotte.
Yep, you got it right.
Those two were on the team there competing, and it sounded like they came away with a good number of medals there, both personally and, of course, in terms of the team in general. So congratulations to them. And it's always great to see people from Neepawa, from the area, going on to other communities, etc., and furthering their athleticism in this way.
Yeah, these two young lads here, they went to, attended school here. Cole was born here. Ethan came here when he was a very young man, young little boy actually, and they've gone off to college together. They're friends and they're competing out there, and it looks really good. And we thank the family member for submitting that information to us, because there's so much going on across the country where people from the area are maybe involved in, and we don't get to hear about it all. So it was a lead that was given to us, and we appreciate that. So if people have leads about interesting stories about people from the area, whether they're living here or not, we appreciate them giving it to us there. You could always, a little bit of an early plug here, you can email it to news@neepawabanner.com or sports@neepawabanner.com.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, much like Ken said, we try to cover all that we can, but we do need help. I mean, whether we're already tied down with other leads and can't make it out, or it's something that's perhaps we haven't heard of, it's always appreciated. Something else not really Neepawa related per se, but still relevant to the area. A bit of Tiger Hills Hockey League news in regards to championship there. The Minnesota Elkhorn Seahawks came out on top. Ken, you'll probably have a bit more of a better perspective on this, but it sounds like they did really well. I believe it was a 3-2 win over Killarney that sort of sealed the deal.
Yeah, well, that's their second championship in a row. They're a combined team between Elkhorn and Minnesota, and they play in the same league as our own Neepawa Farmers, Minnesota Bombers, and the Gladstone Lakers. They all the local coverage teams were eased out of the playoffs as they went along, and these two teams came up on top, and Minnesota Elkhorn, the Seahawks, prevailed again for their second year in a row. So they have some players on the team that people will recognize the names from junior hockey ranks, and I find that encouraging that young men that play the men's hockey, obviously women's hockey is a big thing too, but the junior hockey ranks and then stay in the area. And these young fellas, the two in particular, they're mentioned in the story, they are working in their home area, and so that's kind of nice to see. They're now in their early to mid 20s, and they're done with junior hockey, and but they're playing for their local team, so it's really good to see. I'm always happy to see young people come home or stay home. We're glad you came home. So I find a particular pleasure in going through the list and say, oh, that guy played junior hockey. I know that they farmed in that area forever.
Right.
They run a business in that area. So it's good to see.
Definitely. So speaking of recognizable names, that actually leads well into our next little bit here, and not a full story, but still something of interest to everyone, I'm sure, that comes to Neepawa for pharmaceutical needs. On page 14 there, we have finally the changing of signage on Neepawa Pharmacy to Super Thrifty. Of course, we did a story on that just previously, very recently. And it's switching over to Super Thrifty. They did their soft open just this week. I think that was also on the Tuesday, perhaps.
Yes.
April 2nd. So we have a couple of pictures of the signage going up. And we didn't have these in the paper, but I saw there was also a couple photos taken of the interior as well. And it actually looks like it's just a few little changes, but it actually looks quite different with those changes made.
One thing that Owen mentioned was that the shelves are shorter, which I think is a lot of times store shelves are so high you can't see over them, whatever.
Yeah.
So it provides a little different look, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but it's certainly a new look, and so it's good to see them there. And Nelson Jackson, who owned Neepawa Pharmacy for many years, I think there's actually a little congratulations in the paper here somewhere. I saw it from Harris Pharmacy on his retirement, and so yes, it's right there on page 12. So kudos to Nelson. He was 48 years as a pharmacist. So, but I can outdo him on that because I came here as ag rep in 1971, and he was a 4-H public speaker in the Eden Beef Club before he went to university.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, and he was a good speaker too, a very good speaker. I think I caught the last year of his 4-H career before he went off to university from Eden. Families, he's going to still live there, and family in the area for generations and generations, but well-deserved retirement. So
for sure.
So and nice to see a young local person, Heather Sake, take over the store there and bring in some of the partners from the Super Thrifty group to help her move that along. So.
Definitely, and just speaking pharmacies in general, I had gone down past Harris just somewhat recently, and it'd been a while since I'd done that, and seeing the progress there now was kind of amazing.
on the new building.
Yeah, on the new building. Yeah,
the new building for Harris's is going up as well. It's completed as such, outside wise. I think she's hoping to be into it this fall, but there's all kinds of, Heather said, inspections and regulations and things that need to be done. And of course, stock and shelves and everything else. But anyway, she is building there, and on the site of where the Home Hardware was that burned down a few years ago, right beside the old co-op, but it's actually Salvation Army Neepawa Ministries.
Yeah.
They kind of share a parking lot there, so good to see.
Absolutely. One thing that we should mention here, I know we've still got some time, but I just want to make sure that we do have it shouted out before our time does run up. But we do have a very special feature on this week. That is the Cancer Awareness Month feature on our center spread, so page 10 and 11 there this week. So we've got a bit of information laid out there, and some much appreciated advertising from people who have supported the feature. Make sure to take a look at that. We always like to support causes such as this and shout them out and share some information on that.
Yeah, I would encourage people to have a look at the center spread of the banner this week. We've done this for several years, Cancer Awareness Month, and there's many businesses on there who have put a little money up to place their logo and their message there. From that, we also donate 10% to the local Neepawa Palliative Care program, because unfortunately many people who have cancer end up needing palliative care, as well as from other age and sicknesses as well. So we wanted to support that through this, and that's what we've done for the last few years. So pleased to do that. Joel did a really good job. He got a big spread of ads there, and Diane put it all together and made it look pretty, and so I think you'll enjoy glancing through that and appreciating the fact that we have cancer care. Touches pretty close to home right now, because my wife currently is in her second time of cancer care. She's had 2 surgeries in her life, and actually getting chemotherapy in Neepawa here as we speak. Well, actually yesterday, but on Wednesday. But yeah, it's pretty close to our heart right now. So,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever talked about this, but my grandma on my dad's side, actually, if I'm remembering correctly here, she'd actually passed of cancer as well. I mean, she smoked and stuff, but it's a tough thing to deal with.
Yeah.
So having stuff like this, I know this is from our own paper, but just speaking generally, it's nice to have stuff like this that goes towards supporting those things.
Yeah.
We do have a few minutes left still.
You missed the carbon tax.
Oh, did I?
Number
yes,
2.
I did. I skipped over something, didn't I? Yes.
Yeah.
The carbon tax. We meant to talk about that as well.
Well, it's interesting because we have pictures in the paper that our MP Dan Mazier rented the Yellowhead for a while last week, and put up a free family skating day, which was kind of nice and appreciated. And it was a time he didn't bring his skates. I give him heck about that. But anyway, he wondered if I had mine. No, mine are parked a long time ago. But anyway, he had an event at the arena, and we thank him for his nice big ad that he put in. That's appreciated. Mm-hmm. And I've always been preaching about how government should spend some money on advertising instead of some of the things they do spend it on. But anyway, the tax plan, he said it's a tax plan, not an environmental plan, because he's with the Conservative Party and he's elected here as a Conservative, so I'm sure he finds lots of people in this area that agree with him, but I don't think there's a whole lot of people that would disagree with him. They can tax carbon or gas or diesel all they want. There's certain things that we have no choice but to run the trucks.
Right.
You can't get the grain to terminals. You can't get the cattle to market. You can't get the meat back to the stores, or the canned beans or whatever if you don't like meat. Whatever. Everything moves basically by gas or diesel fuel. And if you want to starve to death in the bush by yourselves, I guess you could go ahead and not use fuel, but everybody uses fuel. And I mean, yeah, we could probably make less trips or whatever. I get that, and we already have. We we pare back our trips to move out of town or Winnipeg or Brandon. We don't go very often to Winnipeg. That's us personally. But there's only so much paring back you can do. Like when the farmer goes to the field with his big combine and it's got 150 gallons of diesel fuel in it, he's got to run those engines or you don't get grain.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get grain, we don't get flour. You don't get flour, you don't get bread.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot of people who say, this doesn't make any sense. Now they're using it also as a way of putting money back into the lower income families. And I guess that's admirable to a certain extent. But if you would give them a higher basic income tax exemption would also help.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, perhaps people would be a little more amicable towards it if it was going towards projects that would further the cause, so to speak.
Yeah.
But I mean, at the moment it's really just sort of my impression, and Mazer seems to have worded it somewhat this way as well. But it really is, or feels like it's just a tax you, get the money for whatever, I don't really know, and just try to make it more expensive to travel so that you hopefully travel less, but that doesn't really work. I mean, people still need to, as you said, they need to get out there, they need to combine, etc., get all the products to get our food, transport the food to where it needs to go, and then, I mean, people still need to go to work. They don't really have many options for being able to do that.
No, talk about work at home all you want,
mm-hmm.
but the majority of people still have to go to work.
Yeah.
And in a rural area, it's not unusual. We have staff who live 25 miles out,
mm-hmm.
and 10 miles out, and 27 miles, I think one of them is. They got to get to work. So anyway, there's a happier story here.
Yes, there is.
And again, this was submitted to us by way of Facebook. And so we were able to, Facebook has its place, and it certainly worked for us here. And that is, we've got a nice story on page 2 about some of the kids from the area who are showing their cattle, who did show their cattle at the Royal Manitoba Winter Fair. So read through that. Those kids work awful hard. They do a great job.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, they had some great photos from their showings there, so much appreciated on that as well, and in conjunction with the details we received. We have just enough time to do another quick little shout out here from this week's paper. Of course, there's always the looking back section each and every week, and highlight just a couple little points here that you might find interesting. From April 1st, 1924, in Kelwood, they unfortunately lost a village landmark. That was the demolition of their curling rink, and with the demolition of that curling rink, the shareholders decided to divide the material and use it for other purposes. So I'm kind of curious what those other purposes were, if it was build some new buildings, etc.
Well, divide the material, it probably, I'm guessing, would have been used to sell to farmers to make barns. Because used material, you could use it in a house, but a lot of material that came out of salvages in those days was turned into livestock facilities.
Right.
Yeah.
And one more quick thing before we wrap up here. This was on a wider scale, but found it interesting, so I left it in there. But it mentioned in 1949, Newfoundland's union with Canada. Now, if you're familiar with history there, you will be aware that that didn't happen for quite some time, so a little interesting tidbit there. But we do need to wrap up for this week, so thank you very much for joining us on this week's episode. As Ken mentioned earlier, please do reach out to us if you have any news tips, photos, etc. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Letters to the editor at news@neepawabanner.com, or give us a call at 204-476-3401. Or if you'd like to get in touch with us for advertising, because we are a free paper, you can do so at ads@neepawabanner.com. Thank you, and have a great week.